May I call upon the moderator for the session, Mr. Krishanu Chakravarti, CEO, Farmer Fortune India Limited, a fully owned subsidiary of Strategy. Huge round of applause, everyone. As he walks up, calling the panelists of the discussion, Mr. Abdul Traor, Secretary General, AECCI, Mr. Adeyemi Murtada Adenji, MD CEO, Starling Global and Ideal Limited, Mr. Mallikarjuna Kamaraswamy, VP and Business Head, Olam Ivory Coast, Mr. Ronald Edmund Philip Ribu, CEO, Flodog Benin, and Mr. Vasudev Barker, Executive Director, ETG Group.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There was a great book published a few years back, Wisdom of Crowd, written by James Sarokovi. In it, it was referred one of the most popular TV shows, Who Wants to Be the Millionaire? As you would know, in that format of Who Wants to Be the Millionaire, a contestant can take the help of either phoning a friend or asking the audience if he or she doesn't have the answer to the question. And as you might guess, phoning an intelligent friend always helps, at least 65% of the time. But here is the interesting fact. The audience in the studio is not chosen by the quality of intelligence they have. So, how much do you think they would be able to get the answer right? Any guesses? Any other guess? You are close. It is 91%. That is a staggering statistic. And on the basis of this statistic, the author says the power of collective wisdom. Today, we have met to discover and answer the million-dollar question, what would be the crop outlook of RCN be in next 6 months? And we hope with the collective wisdom in the people and the expert in this room, we would be able to get it right or closer to right. As you would have anticipated, over the last few years, when the prices of cashew has moved up, so has the cost of getting it wrong. In the year 2000, if you want to buy 100 tons of cashew, you would have invested $45,000. In the year 2017, the same 100 tons of cashew would cost you $200,000. So a 5% error in price positioning will hit you with a loss of $10,000 in 2017 against, say, $2,250 in the year 2000. Last year, when we met in Singapore, in the WCCE, we talked about cashew prices already being too high. And we said possibly a correction is around the corner. It never came down. Actually, in the year 2014, cashew prices were $1,200 per ton. 2015, $1,500 per ton. 2016, $1,700 per ton. And 2017, it has been $2,000 per ton. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us figure it out what lies ahead of us. And to do that, we have a panel of experts with us who would, with their insights, guide us to how does the crop looks like in the next 6 months. We can start off with East Africa. Mr. Vasudev can come over. And as we all know, Tanzania had a fantastic crop, and Mozambique was challenged. Let us hear from him what has been the case.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished panelists and all the members of Cashew Fraternity and guests. Okay, so as we all know, East Africa is done and dusted. Season is over. I can probably only talk about the review, forecasting. The other part of the segment is forecasting for East Africa, probably I will not attempt because it's too far. Okay, so the countries I'm going to cover, the two of these countries. Kenya, as everyone knows, Kenya is almost an insignificant player now. They used to be one of the major players. Now that the production is hardly anything, I'm not covering that. To get into Tanzania. Tanzania, we have been always, I think for the last 4 months, we have been talking that Tanzania crop has been exceptional and it had a record production. So the season, how it did go, so exceptionally good crop, very favorable weather conditions. We do get sometimes a short rain somewhere in the December in Tanzania, but this year we did not really face that. Though there was a rain, it did affect some of the people who have infrastructure, adequate infrastructure, and able to manage their logistics well, they hardly got affected. So largely the weather was okay. And especially the good thing in Tanzania was Matwara port was quite efficient this time versus the previous many years experiences. A number of reasons for that. I don't want to get into the reasons why it got efficient, but at least there were 2 berths. Always it has been 1 vessel berth space. This year we had 2 vessel berth space, and the movement of the vessel was pretty quick because there was no other hindrances. Largely it went smooth, and most of the people could do their commitments, or they could meet up their commitments. And Mozambique, average to good crop. The crop official data which just published says that Mozambican crop is around 105,000 ton. We do know that in the midway, unfavorable weather condition, rain started. The South Mozambique crop still we have not seen. Probably there will be some. Generally it gives around 30,000 tons of cargo, which might come, a small portion of it might come out good. A majority of that portion has gone bad. Mozambique has been having heavy rains for the last 30 days. I think only in the last week there has been a bit favorable weather condition in terms of having sunshine. Otherwise, 25 to 30 days of previous to that was completely with rain and flood. So there were tremendous problems in terms of able to manage the quality. And also logistical challenges, as many of us would know. Mozambique is very long country, almost 3,000 kilometers from north to south. And if you want to move from up north to Nacala or Beira, it's always a challenge. So this is one of the things which exceptionally felt this year. Logistic has been challenging because if you want to move your cashew out from north to south with one-way transport costs, it becomes unaffordable. And also there has been some issues around the duty fixing. We are also facing some challenges currently as we speak on the shipments because there has been exceptional, delayed or long haul process to process your document. I think they did have some wrong experience, bad experience in terms of people avoiding duty. Let me quickly go into the next slide. This is about the production, what we have seen, and the production previous to that year. So the Tanzanian crop, with a little bit of export still pending, so it was around 310,000 tons. So it is a record production, which has never crossed 300,000. Previous year, that is year which is 16-17. This what I'm talking 310 is the current year, that's 17-18, was 274,000 tons. So this is a substantial improvement. And what can happen this year? We do think if everything goes well, it should be about 300,000 tons. So this is only a very wild guess and going by the normal trend. And what has been exported? So there is a bit of number added to the extent which is not exported yet. So the export would be eventually totaling up to around 291,000. 250 plus thousand was exported when I prepared this as 291,000, and the previous year was 260,000. And this is another thing which I think might be interesting to many of us. What has gone to India in the previous year was 146,000 versus the year just gone by is 125,000 ton. And to Vietnam, you can see it has gone up. It's 165,000 ton out of 291,000 has gone to Vietnam alone. So which shows clearly that Vietnam is becoming increasingly a major player in Tanzania as well. Earlier, I think maybe 3 years back, if you go, it's always been mostly going to India, especially the Tanzanian crop. But now Vietnam is becoming increasingly a bigger player. And Tanzanian processing is not really going up much. We being one of the major players, I think majority of that is from ETG, the processed number. Okay, this is just the price trend. I'll quickly touch. Maybe I'm running short out of time. So the price was around 2,150 in January 2017, the end of last season. And it has touched the heights of 2,450, and it was slightly sliding down. Now that crop is exhausted, on the referential is the West African. I would think the comparative West African comparative current prices would be around 2,350 today, if you want to price it, though nothing is available in the market. This is Mozambique. Again, if you can see, the crop size has slightly come down. That's mostly because of the weather pattern. Then the export is going to be less this year because the processing is going to go up. I will just touch that. So 86,000 was exported previous to last year, and what we estimate, it's absolutely estimation because so far nothing has been exported. Maybe the first vessel is just sailing, is around 40,000, anything between 40 to 45,000, I would say. And what would eventually go to India and Vietnam, probably the equal amount of cargo. This again is just an estimate. Previous year, India had imported around 55,000 ton plus and Vietnam around 14,000. So again, the trend is the same reflecting trend would be there. Vietnam is becoming important player even in Mozambique. And when you come to processing, again, the processing is probably, Mozambique is one of the most successful country in terms of processing. Probably giving those initiatives and able to ensure that its initiatives are absolutely practiced on ground. So we estimate that Mozambican processing would go above 60,000 tons for the year. Okay, so Mozambican price trend, it has been more or less consistent from $1,800, which you have seen in January, which is hovering around $2,000. So pretty much, somewhere there. And today, I think if you want to price it, I think it will be still the same. So that's it from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Now, what can be more important than IVC crop? Not only it's the largest producer of RCN, but it has been growing at a staggering growth rate, CAGR of over 12% during last 7 years. So I would like to invite Mr. Abdul Traore to give us some more insight on IVC crop.
Hello, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for having me as a speaker. As the chairman said, my name is Abdul Traore. I'm the Secretary General and the Ambassador of the AACCI. We stand for l'Association des exportateurs de cajou de Côte d'Ivoire. In English, the Cashew Exporter Association of Ivory Coast. So today I was asked to say a few words about the RCN market outlook for 2018. And that's what I'm going to try to do. But I was told I've got only 5 minutes, so I'm going to rush a little bit. As we all know, Ivory Coast is a leading RCN producer in Africa and arguably in the world. Okay? As such, what may happen or may not happen in the Ivory Coast is very important to know, as it will have an impact on the rest of the world, on the rest of the market. My presentation of this evening will be structured around 3 parts. The first part will give you some data about the outgoing season, the 2017. Then I will look at the weather forecast leading up to the 2018. And lastly, I will give you our expectation in terms of volume and rates for 2018. Right, let's look at the figure for 2017. As the director of CCA just said this afternoon, Dr. Coulibaly, last year we produced in the region of 700,000 metric tons. That's the volume, total volume produced. And as is also clarified, that does not include the volume that was smuggled across the border, the eastern border and the northern border for Ivory Coast. Okay? So we can assume it's more than 700,000, the figure he gave this afternoon. Out of those 700,000 metric tons, about 80 to 90% are exported raw toward India and Vietnam, which happen to be the main market for Ivory Coast. In terms of processing, if we look at the graph I just showed you, the volume process will be in the region of 10%. Obviously, this trend has been going on for many years, and the government of Ivory Coast has been working hard to change the trend by encouraging local processing. And one of such initiatives is a biannual conference set up by the government to encourage and promote local processing. It's called the theater. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it. And the theater will bring together different stakeholders from different parts of the world to come together, discuss, come up with action plan which will encourage and promote local processing, because we know what kind of value is added when the cashew is processed. And we hope to see some result over the next few years. Now let's move on to the next slide. We're going to look at the weather forecast leading up to the 2018 season. As you know, the weather has a really important impact on the production of cashew. So let's look at the weather forecast. According to the weather agency in the Ivory Coast, the weather forecast has been favorable and good in general. In terms of rainfall, in terms of sun, there was no adverse weather condition reported in any part of Ivory Coast, as far as we are aware, especially those major cashew growing area, which is a very good news for all of us. The flowering, the cashew flowering also has been very good and healthy. So based on those information, we can confidently predict a very good crop for 2018, which is also a great news. Now, let's look at our expectation for 2018 in terms of volume. As Dr. Coulibaly mentioned earlier on, last year we had in a region of 700,000 metric tons. And based on historical figure, in Ivory Coast we have an annual growth of around 8% each year. So if we had 700,000 last year, we can expect for 2018 in the region of 750,000 for 2018. And I'm quite confident we will hit that target. Now, I'm sure this is the next slide, is what most people are waiting for, which is what is the price expectation for 2018? This is a very delicate question, because I'm here on behalf of the ASCI, the Cashew Exporter Association, and as such, we're not a regulatory body, and we can't really speculate or be the source of rumor. So I wouldn't want to go into it. I will leave that task to Dr. Coulibaly to tell us. But the only thing I could tell you is the government will make an announcement through CCA, le Conseil Coton à la Carte, in terms of announcing the rate for 2018. Historically, it usually happened toward the end of February or early March. So you'll have to bear with us and wait for the new rate to be announced. However, what I can tell you is, once you make your budget for 2018, you have to make a provision for a slight increase, because recently there was a new tax which was introduced to help improve the sector. So based on only that, we can say there will be a slight increase. So doing your budgeting, you have to make provision for a slight increase. When the government also set the rate, there are a number of factors they will look into. I'll give you three. One of those factors is to look at the level of production in India and Vietnam, because they're the main market for Ivory Coast. So that production in those two countries will have an impact on the rate set by the government. The other thing that the government will look into is the demand for cashew kernel on the international market. So that also will be taken into account. And lastly, the government will look at the currency variation between the euros and the US dollar. As you know, in the Ivory Coast, we use the CFA, and the CFA is linked to the euro, and the euro linked to, as you know, the trade is done in dollar. So you have to take into account that fluctuation between the dollar and the euro. So all of those factors will be taken into account to set the rate by the government. That's what I can tell you, but you'll have to be patient to see what the actual rate is for 2018. Before I wrap up my presentation, I want to inform you that the AACI is organizing this month, between the 22nd and the 24th of Feb, an event called the National Exporter Day. It will be held at the Radisson Blue Hotel, for those who know Abidjan, between the 22nd and the 24th of February. So you're all invited to attend. It will be a pleasure to meet you there again. So thank you very much for your attention. I want to wish you a very good season for 2018. A lot of quality cashew at great price. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul Traore. Actually, you had covered a lot of variables crisply, concisely, in a short period of time. Thank you so much. Actually, it would be unfair to see IVC in isolation, because West African crop is growing at a staggering rate of 15% CAGR over the last 7 years. And the border is porous. So there would be a lot of trade flow from one country to the other. And who would be a better person to talk about West African crop rather than Mallikarjuna, who handles the cashew trade for Olam out of IBC.
So I'm going to talk about West Africa overall, the trend and how's it looking for next year. We have seen year of 2016 where everybody expected a short crop. Cocoa in Ivory Coast was a short crop and also coffee, but the cashew is the only product probably which bucked the trend, and it remained as strong as 2015 and 2016. Okay, so the growth did not happen, but the weather did not impact overall. I'll take this in the end, what's in the store for 2018. Historical crop of West Africa, if you see, it's growing at 15%. 15% CAGR is a phenomenal growth for any crop. This data is not by any authenticated resource, but it is from the customs of India and Vietnam combined, and it is adjusted with the local processing. I will not claim that this is the most authentic data. It is as best it can get. Okay. So if you see in this, the important factor to note is the staggering growth of a few countries in last 3 years. For example, if you look at Nigeria as a almost doubling of the crop, while Benin reduced in last 2 years. So these are the things which happens in cashew trade when there is a change in the tax structure, and this has to be kept in mind during every crop year. There is overall growth in each country, but I would like to look at this growth in a cluster of 3 different countries clusters. Let's look at how it looks if you break this into 3 clusters. I have broken this cluster into IGBMT, which I mean is Ivory Coast, Ghana, Burkina, Mali, and Togo, because Togo doesn't have a crop of its own, but the exports happen from Burkina to Togo. So overall, IGBMT is what I coin as a new cluster. It has grown at 14%. Then there is another cluster which is combined growing at 19%, which is Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, Senegal, and Gambia. Guinea-Conakry is one country which has clearly taken a good growth in last few years. You can see in the individual slide here. Guinea-Conakry actually grew from nothing to a substantial number. Yeah. And then Beneria, which is Benin and Nigeria, this has also grown at 15%. But individually, if you look at what I mentioned exactly, Benin, from 2015, it was 170,000 tons exported. In 2016, it became suddenly 95,000 tons, while Nigeria in the same time grew from 120 to 150, and from there to 220,000 tons last year. It's phenomenal. Okay, what a trade structure change in any country will directly affect what happens to the export from the same country. So IVC cluster is the overall the biggest crop, which is already 950,000 tons in 2016. Overall, the West Africa is 1.56 million tons. So what's in store for 2018? What we have seen in each country in West Africa, including Ivory Coast, crop is looking normal. There is no adverse news. So no adverse news is a good news for cashew production. We would see that the crop probably will grow like it has grown in last 6-7 years. Prices continue to be high, okay, because of which there is an incentive for every farmer to pick that last nut. I think in last 2-3 years, this has been the important factor in the increased production or increased exports. I expect 1 million tons from IGBMT cluster, and overall, it should be anywhere between 1.6 to 1.65 million tons. Okay. Why it happened? Reasons I already discussed. A steep RCN price has led to a commercial incentivization for farmers. In Ivory Coast kind of region in the country, there are a couple of areas which have grown significantly than others. The Segila and Mankuno region, which we have seen, it's a good quality area and where the growth has happened much bigger than any other region in Ivory Coast. There will be a continued premium Mangalore gave for Benin. It has really taken care of this entire Beneria complex growth. And I would see that it will continue in 2018 also. Even after 2016 El Nino effect, there was no growth in the crop if you look at the previous slides. But after that, there is a significant increase of 200,000 tons. It is something called hidden potential of the cashew crop, where it is, in a particular year, it can be lower due to climatic conditions. But when the climatic conditions become favorable, there is that spurt which happens, and that's what led to a significant growth in 2017. And most important thing is that why, if you look at the crop growth from 2014 onwards increase, is clearly an initiative of government of Cote d'Ivoire, CCR, which clearly shows to say that the government initiative can really make a big reform in the production of the crop. If you remember in 2014, when the prices were fixed at the minimum, there was a lot of resistance, and at the midway, we had all expected that CCI will reduce the price. But it did not happen, and the prices picked up, and the entire crop was consumed. So that year onwards, there is no looking back. The RCN prices have been in an increasing trend, and also the production. So these are the reasons which I believe will continue to fuel the growth of raw cashew nut production in West Africa. 1.6 million, 1.65 million can be a start, but we can look at 2 million very soon, say in 3 or 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mallikarjuna. As I was hearing him out, a couple of things crossed my mind. One is at micro level, the other was macro. Micro was much more simpler. We all know Bissau volume has been somewhere around 200,000 ton for some time, and Conakry has started taking off. But Conakry land size would be 3 times that of Bissau, and conditions favorable for cashew growth. What can be the possibility of its potential cashew production as we move forward? The second point that came to my mind, which possibly we will we will dwell on it after the presentations. IVC has seen stupendous growth in cashew production over last 7-8 years. And one thing that had incentivized what Malik had been saying was the price of cashew. So A, what crop it would have substituted, and B, cashew crop typically will take 3 to 4 years to bear fruit. So whatever had been planted during last couple of years would definitely come into production in next couple of years. And therefore, what would be the ramification in the overall produced volume and therefore the price? Okay, Nigeria, I don't know how many of you would have noticed that last year had a stupendous growth in export volume. I think you would be the right person to talk about it. It moved to somewhere around 220,000 tons from 160,000 tons, right? And what are the possible reasons? Nigeria has always been an intriguing country for us, be it cashew, be it cocoa, be it any other rice. So we would like to hear from Mr. Adeyemi Murtada Adenzi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My names are Adeyemi Adeniji, Starlink Global and ID Limited. I bring very good news from Nigeria. It is not surprising, maybe to some people, to find out that our production has increased. We've always been having very good production. But because of the foreign buyers that have given preferential prices to Benin Republic ahead of Nigeria, that was why we have been having, in quotes, lower production. But when that one changed about 3 years ago, because what happened in the past was from Benin Republic, they do transborder export, buying of our crop, and they call it Benin border. This one they call Benin border is Ogbomoso cashew that has the best quality in the entire West Africa. But what happens? People will cross because they have $300 premium price ahead of that of Nigeria. Then it will become very easy for people to trade this cashew across the border to Benin Republic. As the representative of Olam has just said, that of Benin went down and that of Nigeria increased because we now have relatively not still balanced price that has discouraged people coming to all these sources to take cashew. The second one, where did we get a better quality in the last 3 years? How? It is the same thing. In the past, there was so much pressure on the farmers to pluck even the immature ones because they wanted to sell. And because of the premium price of our neighboring countries, they could come and take the cashew cheaper, and the farmers were under pressure to push the cashew to them. They are not even bothered about the quality, whether it's moisture is high or not. They are not bothered. But in the last 3 years, the federal government of Nigeria has put a lot of control on it. I think, let us look at the slides from Starlink Global and ID Limited. Only 10% were exported, as I've explained. But what has made it a bit better was the government has created a very strong control. And it's going to continue because the value chain of cashew has a system. And they are going to prevent people that will take 2 weeks visa, go to our farm gate and start to buy cashew. Government is becoming very strict on that one so that the farmers can do a proper job, harvest properly, and deliver the very, very good quality to the international market. The climate in 2018 crop season has been very wonderful. The last time rain fell in Nigeria was around November. And what makes cashew fruit properly is a balanced rainfall. And there was some time that was not excessive, was reasonable, and we expect the Nigerian crop to grow from 175 to 100,000 tons to 225,000 tons in 2018. But this is where the trouble is. If you look at it, Nigeria, because this one is not fabricated, this source was gotten from FINACAS, that's Vietnamese Cashew Association. So it is authentic document. If you look at it, Nigeria had an average price of 1750, and Cote d'Ivoire was 2,100, Benin 2,050. So there's still this imbalance. And if this trend continues, we will likely go back to where we started from, where it will be at premium to some other countries, and it will give them opportunity to also destroy the quality and the value chain. So I think the international buyers from Vietnam and India should look at it very seriously. If we continue to have reasonably close pricing, it will encourage Nigerian farmers to increase the production. We have the land. We are the largest holder of land, arable land in the whole of Africa. We can produce more. We can do better quality. There is a new rule in Nigeria today. No farmer will sell cashew that is higher than 10% moisture from 2018. And the federal government is very serious about it. The issue of pillability, post-harvesting handling that have been a trouble is going to be changed. And the buyer, the destinations will see a better, more resourceful Nigerian cashew in 2018 and moving forward. But you need to help us too on the price differential. The price has to be close, and you can see the benefit in the quality and in the production. So what are we looking at in 2018? Sincerely, we want a lowest price of $2,100. And that one will help us to increase our production and also increase the volume. In conclusion, these are the major things that we want to achieve. One, we want partnership from India and Vietnam so that we can increase the processing of cashew in the next 5 to 10 years. It will help. Instead of us to ship raw cashew nut to Vietnam and pay very high freight, we can process in Africa, and we are closer to America and Europe. So we are looking at this very strong partnership that will help us to increase the capacity and also in processing. The second one is we don't want a distortion to the value chain. A situation whereby people will come straight to the farm gate and prioritize the farmers to sell cashew to pluck cashew that is not matured, to sell the ones that are not properly dried is going to be discouraged very strongly. And the government is also very serious about it. Then price disparity should be looked at very strongly by our partners in Vietnam and in India. We are ready, Nigeria is very ready to increase our production and to also work on the quality. This year, in 2018, National Cashew Association of Nigeria, in partnership with Nigeria Export Promotion Council and private sectors, have agreed to look for any shipping line officially that will take our cashew to Vietnam and India in 30 days. We are tired of shipping line that will take it, they will promise us 30 days, and they will deliver it in 70 days. It's giving us very bad name. So after we have worked on the farmers to make sure that the moisture that is leaving Nigeria is going to be less than 10%, at the same time, we also want to take it further by looking for a firm commitment from shipping lines that will take our cashew to destination in 30 to 33 days. good news is we have found one who have shown very strong commitment, and we are going to do it. Thank you very much.
Now we'll move on to Benin. You know, as a team, we were coming to this conference. We got a lot of requests from the cashew processors, especially in the western part of India, to get Benin cashew. So we worked pretty closely with the small processors, the new one, and we realized that there is a huge demand for this Benin cashew, raw cashew nuts. Fluder in Benin has been into cashew processing, and they have been working on sustainability. And for our industry, cashew industry, sustainability has been something very close to our heart. So I would like to request Mr. Philippe to talk about the crop forecast in Benin and sustainability program that you do.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, we have, as Fluder Benin, we have a unit which is processing cashew nut. The present capacity is between 12 and 15,000 tons, and we would go next year to 18,000 tons. So for us, the production of Benin has to increase in order that we can get our raw material, and this is, as a matter of fact, a very important aspect of our activity. Okay, so very quickly I will talk about the background, as so many figures have been given, so I don't think it is very necessary to go to that, compare country as country, it has been done already. Just the background, that is that production of cashew has started, in fact planting of cashew tree has started in the 60s, but not in the aim of producing something commercial, but it was much more to avoid erosion. It was done by the state, so the productivity was not good, and even when the private sector started, it was not done in a very scientific way, so that presently the profitability, the yield of the crop is something like 300 kilos per hectare, which is, not very much compared to some countries, to India, to Vietnam especially, or even to Cambodia, for example. Let's not talk about Ghana, which is much better than us. So the crop, let's say, is centered into 3 regions, basically. The full north is for cotton. The south doesn't have any production. So let's say the large center is divided, we can divide it in two regions, which produce central region, which is about 40,000 tons. Jugu, another good regions, is 40,000 tons, and Parakou, which is lesser quality, we should say, is 45,000 tons. So now about quantities. As the previous speaker has said, it's sometimes very difficult to assess exactly what is the production of the country because a lot of cross-border. But let's say we estimate that last year it was under 25,000 tons, out of which 80,000 tons were trading, 15,000 ton processing, out of which a good part for Fluder, and 30,000 ton cross-border, that is with Togo mainly, I think. For 2018, what to say? It's a little bit too early because the flowering has just started. Some small quantities which appear on the market with 5-10 kilos each are traded presently at 500-700 CFA per kilo. We expect, of course, the market to go much higher. The Ministry of Commerce is deciding when we start lifting, so it will be 15th of March normally, but we don't know whether the processors will be authorized to lift earlier. We would like to have 3 weeks, if possible 4 weeks, before the export is allowed. So let's hope that it will be done. Well, you have challenges for processing. I'm a processor, so I would like to talk very quickly about the challenges which occur for us. The first one is obviously the machineries which come from other countries. So we compete against India, against Vietnam, which are able to get their machineries, let's say, on the spot. We have to import. We have to have a lot of spare parts ready for in case of any breakdown, which is that there is an overcost of 40% we estimate compared to our competitors of Vietnam, India, etc. Then there is a problem of getting the raw material. This is, we should get in 2 months in just one origin, that is Benin. Other quantities support a huge stock, finance it during the next 10 months, which is a very big challenge compared to other countries which are able to get different origin from even different hemisphere. Then we have the problem of starting the tradition of processing the nuts, which means training women, a lot of women, in order that they become more efficient, in order that we can improve our efficiency. Then we have the problem of logistics, of warehousing, which is not the case, for example, with Vietnam, which is having various origins one after the other. And finally, we have the competition of the exporters who try to get the raw material at the same time as us. So all this is a very big challenge. So we expect the government to help us to get more to those issues. Fixation of the date of starting of the campaign is a big issue. As I said, we would like to have like 3 weeks, even 4 weeks, in order to be able to get our quantities before everybody is able to go for it and export. We want to have some regulatory measures. For example, we have a tax, export tax. It should be equal to the other ones. If, for example, Côte d'Ivoire is giving a bigger export tax, then everybody will rush to Benin, etc., or Nigeria or any other country. So it should be equal for all the countries of West Africa. And end of the day, we should like to have much bigger crop. And this is a big subject for us. As a company, we have made a lot of lobbying on that. So we know that the government wants to go from 100,000 tons to 300,000 tons of raw nuts in the next few years and have half of the quantity processed locally. For this, we need a government policy which is being implemented. So we hope that in the months to come, there will be a release that policy put in place in order that from the side of the production is going to grow. We just say that 15% growth in West Africa. For the moment, is not the case for Benin. We should say like 5%, because we need a lot of steps to be taken before the production can go up very much, like starting from the small trees and then going to implement measures which can be very quick. Like, for example, now there are too many trees per hectares, which means that some trees can be cut, they can be trimming. And in a very short period of time, we could have an increase of production of 30%, 40%. But after that, in order to go from 300 kilos per hectare to 400, 500, 600 kilos per hectare. But after that, we have to have new plantations, or cutting the old plantation and replacing them, which is going to take time. So this is a big issue. So the Beninese delegation here is listening, and we hope that the Ministry of Agri, Ministry of Commerce will do the needful in order that we can increase the production. As far as Fludor, we have, through NGOs that I'm the president of, made a movement which is called Cajou Demain, that is Cashew Tomorrow, which is working with close cooperation with TechnoServe in order to induce Beninese people to get this planter spirit, which is the reason of the success of Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you.
Now we can take the questions, but before I open it to the floor, we already have one question, which is quite common. One of you is asking, with the increase in processing capacity in Africa, would the export from Africa of RCN get reduced or come to a need? I think a similar kind of question came last year, and it was very well answered by you. Yeah, so if you can answer it once again for the sake of audience.
If you can just look at history, 1999, I believe Africa was producing around 400,000 tons. And this year, if you say this 17, 18 as the year, the production is around 1.9 million ton. And that speaks volume about that. So what has happened in the processing sphere, though, I think last year I was answering the question also in a way that African processing has not been going up the way, African governments or associations, the way they plan or support or all these things. It's not really happening. Maybe there could be some other reasons also, along with many other constraints. We as processor, because we run 5 plants between Mozambique and Tanzania, and we intend to invest more in East as well as West Africa. So the processing, while it is going, even in the event this processing in Africa goes in a rapid phase, the production is going in a much more rapid speed. So I don't think there is anything to worry. The production of Africa in the rock cashew space is going to go up, phenomenally up, and each and every country of importance here, who are all here, they're all taking more measures to increase the production further up, while they're also putting a lot of efforts in increasing the processing in their respective countries. So both will go hand in hand, and I'm sure our chairman has just mentioned 60% of the arable land of the world is still in Africa. And we know that a phenomenal portion of that arable land is still sitting idle. There's so much of land to cultivate more, grow more, and Africa is going to be the future, probably the feeder for the whole world. So I don't think it is anything to worry on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So what essentially you were saying that the rate at which, or the absolute volume of production will always be higher than processing, right? And if I may add, one more important thing that you told last year was the challenges with respect to the processing. If you remember it correctly, you said, look, 10 ton of processing factory is much easier to run compared to 20 tons. And as you increase the magnitude, the multiplicity of the challenges also increase. So obviously, when you increase the volume in Africa, it will be faced with far more challenges, which will take some time Africa would take some time to gear up with it. Therefore, I also completely agree with what Vasudev is saying.
My question is to Mr. Mallikarjuna. We've seen in your presentation that the growth in the last few years in West Africa has been almost 15%. What kind of infrastructural changes have happened in the West Africa? Is the government doing anything in terms of ensuring there's no bottleneck as we grow? If you've grown 15% now, obviously we'll continue to grow probably 18, 20% in the years. In terms of port infrastructure or all other basic infrastructures, plus the drying facility, moisture has been one of the biggest value destroyers for this crop. So what kind of drying facilities and everything, has that upgradation come?
What has happened in last 2 years, the phenomenal growth is, like I mentioned, the growth was always there. Between 2015 to 16, there was not much of growth because that was a year where the climate conditions were not conducive. As I mentioned, that there is a spurt or a hidden potential which exhibits when the crop or the climate becomes normal. That's what happened in 2017. So that's the reason we saw a good spurt in 2017. But in 2018, there will be growth, but not as phenomenal as it was in 2017. What has improved in West Africa is really, there is a few areas where there is some improvement. For example, Guinea-Bissau is one of the countries where infrastructure is not so great, but exporters have taken it on themselves to ensure that everyone has a drying yard, and they have been very careful. And I'm sure every processor sitting here will appreciate that Guinea-Bissau, you can be rest assured that it is, it is dry. Yeah. The same has happened in Ghana and Burkina, where the crop has higher number of ports to, Togo has become a port of major significance now, and then Tema is there. So Burkina and Ghana, by the virtue of overall movement of cashew in the value chain, all the way from Burkina and from the upcountry areas of Ghana, consciously there is an effort to dry and keep the condition better. That comes to a country like Côte d'Ivoire, which has the massive crop and the port infrastructure or the port city itself is not suitable for handling so much of raw nut and drying. So that's the reason CCI has made it mandatory for farmers to dry, and they have been following it rigorously and checking it at the warehouses. And they've also created one dry port in Buake, and San Pedro is also a third port, because of which there is chances of higher availability of infrastructure. Unfortunately, San Pedro has not picked up in a big volume. If it happens, then there is more chance of scope for drying. Apart from this, one of the factors which probably has not helped Ivory Coast cashew being more humid is that we as exporters ourselves have been negligent in accepting the cashew, which is, there is a request or there is a condition that it should be minimum 10%, but exporters themselves have been negligent or too greedy, I would say, to accept that kind of raw material, and then not taking enough care to ship it out. So the extent of the demand for raw nut is so much that everybody wants to lay their hand on anything available. So this is probably one of the things which we should carefully look into in coming years. And there are significant investments from exporters, as seen in Côte d'Ivoire. Probably it is going to see some results in coming years. Hope that answers your question.
At this point, may I request the moderator to present the mementos to the panelists, please? The first one up, we will have Mr. Abdul Traore, Secretary General, AECCI. Round of applause, please. Next up, we have Mr. Adeyemi Murtada Adenji, MD CEO, Starling Global and Idea Limited. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Next up will be Mr. Mallikarjuna Kumaraswamy, VP and Business Head, Olam Ivory Coast. Mr. Ronald Edmund Philip Ribu, CEO, Flodor Benin. And last but not the least, Mr. Vasudev Barker, Executive Director, ETG Group. All right, it's time to present a memento for our moderator, Mr. Krishanu Chakravarti. May I request Mr. Vasudev, Kamad DVK Group, to come and present the memento to Mr. Krishanu, please?